What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Big Six Podcast, CBS Sports Daily NFL Podcast. I'm Will Brinson. I'm your host. It's Tuesday, August 25th, and football is actually around the corner, so we are getting you ready for the season from a fantasy perspective, from a gambling perspective, from a nerd out perspective. All the shows from last week, Nerd/Analytics Week, some really good conversations about, it's not like you basically utilizing analytics and how, talking to different analysts from around the NFL about how to utilize analytics properly and maybe to give you some insight into some stuff that could happen in the 2020 season, which is going to be wild. And of course, fantasy football is gearing up. Yesterday's show, we talked to Jamie Eisenberg, our CBS Sports' own. He was too big time to us, didn't have much time to talk to us, but that's okay. Jamie's thinks he's an important person, or thinks his cousin's an important person, maybe. It's Jesse Eisenberg. Speaking of important people, joining me now, good friend of the show, was on last year. We nailed the Minnesota Vikings over. It did hit, right? It hit like week 10. Brandon Guptill, a.k.a. Gup from gupscorner.com. What's up, buddy?
Not much. How you doing today? It's a kind of feels – I don't know if it's because we talked about doing this pod or just in general in the community and all that. It finally feels like football's going to happen in some way, shape, or form. Not sure about college all the way, but NFL starting to talk about fantasy drafts and DFS strategies and preseason bets and all that kind of stuff's kind of gearing up here in the last 3 or 4 days. So I'm kind of excited for it. As well, golf's still going on, so that's exciting. But I am getting excited to watch the football on TV since we had not had preseason so far this year.
Yeah, that's the thing. And I would say, by the way, for people who don't know, gupscorner.com is a great one-stop shop for basically every sport you got gambling on there, you got DFS, you got regular fantasy, all kinds of content. And I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Gup, but you guys, I think the thing about Gup's Corner that makes it so unique is that it's like there's a Slack channel that's just it's like ridiculous. The community there where everybody talks throughout. I don't know, 10,000 people in there. Hell, I don't know, but it's constantly filled. It's hilarious to watch on Thursday mornings. I love DFS golf, as people who listen to this podcast know. It's hilarious because people get on there and start like melting down because somebody bogeys the first hole. Their lineups have gone to crap by like 9:15 a.m. You got to be brave to get in there. Now, granted, I'm guilty and do the same thing. I'm like walking my dog, like, grill, screaming at some golfer. But people should go check that out. You guys have monthly plans and yearly plans. You got a bunch of tools for DFS, lineup construction stuff, as well, like optimizers, in-tournament golf tools. And I'll let you fill us in on the NFL tools because this is not a golf podcast as much as I try to make.
Yeah, so we, I stepped away from corporate America for the first time as Gup's Corner continued to grow earlier this year and doing this full time now. Took a little risk. That was fine, but we calculated, me and my wife, we planned on it that long. So having it as my full focus now is allowed to grow the team even more. We have 2 great programmers. ADHD well. I know you guys chat back and forth.
Yeah.
One of the brilliant minds in not only football, golf.
Josh ADHD. You've seen him. He does all kinds of DFS stuff. He has offered to send me whiskey. I'm greatly appreciative of it. All he said is I got to send him some IPA. So we're going to, at some point, we'll swap
it. Yeah. No, he's a great guy. And we brought Bobby Gould on, who's another Aggie. So that Josh and him kicked it off that way. But 2 great guys there that are helping us develop. You've seen it with the golf tools and everything out. And then Degree Machine, that has the lineup generator and stuff. We'll be adding, it already does NASCAR, UFC, and golf, but we'll be adding football, NBA, the multi-position sports as well here as we approach football season. So a lot going on. It definitely is a great time to join because of a unique setup with golf. Normally we're kind of winding down golf right now. We got the little fall swing, which most people don't really pay attention to, but we got 2 more weeks of the FedEx and then, the U.S. Open, the Masters still to come. It's going to be a nonstop deal, which worked out for me because normally I was doing, 60 hours a week at corporate office and then trying to do all this at night. So having my full focus has allowed us to grow the platform that much more. And you can join monthly, annual. The nice thing about it is it's all included. So we don't break it up by sport, anything like that. Whichever package you decide to get, it includes all the sports. It's just whether you want to add the customized tools to allow you. So in golf, I know it's a football podcast, and as you can go in there and build your entire custom models. Use some of my stuff if you want. If you don't want to, if you want to tweak stuff, if you want to deep dive, we have you covered there. We have the lineup generator that it's for everything as well. And then the football tools are revamping from last year. We're solid last year, but now that we have some internal programmers, we bring in, real in-depth look at, like you talked about, probably, I caught up on some of your pods from last week on the analytical side, but, snaps per play, percentage of snaps that guys are on the field or sharing on the field, yards per play, all that stuff that can dictate a game or a flow or a pace in football for us. We have that for college and NFL. College, we're obviously on
college football DFS is somehow huge. And it was big last year. And I don't think I even really realized it. Do you think DFS has caught up to regular fantasy at this point? Overall?
Yes, because of you even see with some of the best ball stuff is overtaking the season long, because people they don't like jacking with their stuff every week. So let's do a big best ball and, they just, whatever happens. So I think the DFS, the reset, the DGen in you gets you going, and you want to go, start fresh, if you will. Right. So you don't have the same team. So I think I think, fortunately for guys like me and people in this industry, especially the golf side, I think because golf was really the first thing to come back, a lot of eyes got to it, and people, a lot of people that I've talked to never played golf before. They were always big NFL or NBA. They actually like golf as much as anything because it stretches out over 4 days. There is around showdown stuff, but that sweat, there's not much like the cut sweat.
There's nothing like a cut sweat. You're like there's like golf on television. You're like, I don't even want to see this. What I need is a Corey Connors cam. I need to know if this friggin' Canadian a-hole is going to make this 6-foot putt. And I know he's not. Like it's, and golf is actually the reason I ended up, because I texted you on Sunday night with can you do the pod Monday when we're recording this? In case any news breaks, I always like to put that caveat out there. But because you had DJ Dustin Johnson outright in the golf tournament, and had him in a ton of lineups, and that my wheel started turning. I was thinking about it because he was 8% owned, and he won. He shot 30 under. He won by 11 strokes, and even if you had DJ, it doesn't mean you definitely won. But I just started thinking about NFL DFS and whether do you think that sort of stuff exists quite as much, where you have the option to smash for somebody who's an 8% guy? You're not gonna see Christian McCaffrey 8%, right?
Right. No, yes and no, I think, and we'll continue to see this with golf. Football's so saturated market. There's so many great platforms out there to go get information from, and a lot free. But some of even the in-depth kind of guys out there, Establish a Run, those guys are great guys. Any of those kind of platforms, you start to get a lot of groupthink, and a lot of the same guys are going to be on fading the same one. So there are leverage spots, but they're still going to be risky. And it's where do you do your combos and stuff? Which is huge in DFS: quarterback, running back, or quarterback, wide receiver, or even quarterback, wide receiver, tight end. The correlation plays and all that kind of stuff. There's still some leverage there, because you're going to have guys so priced up that sometimes, well, I'm not going to pay that for him, because he's got to have an A+ type game, and it's a one game type deal. Golf is a little different because the recency, but it's weird in golf, which is opposite from football. In football, when a guy has a breakout game or a hot game, everybody jumps on him the next week. Yeah. Golf is opposite. Like this week, albeit no one was on DJ last week, mainly because of a couple bad rounds 4 or 5 weeks ago, but his last 3 tournaments, he's finished 12th, 2nd, and 1st. So it's not like he won. I had him at, 6 weeks ago when he won. I had him there as well. It's not like he's not elite, but because of pricing and, the volatility in golf, people will go, I'll just take that risk and not pay up for DJ, because I can pay, all these guys play 18 holes a day, and as long as they make the cut, they're going to play 72 holes, which is the uniqueness of golf as opposed to football. Not everybody's going to get the usage like Zeke or, like you said, CMC. They're not going to. Not every running back, not every offense is built like that. Golf is
that's a good point. Usage is equal across golf. You're getting, if you make the cut, the 72 holes, whereas in football, it all comes down to game script, and it varies week to week, and you're sort of guessing. The Buccaneers were very good against the run last year, but terrible against the pass. So if you're a DFS guy, you don't want to start the running back going against the Bucs. You want the wide receivers. That sort of thing. So what do you think that there's? What are some strategy points you have when you start to? And this, this is going to be we're going to do DFS chat, some fantasy, and then after the break we'll do because we're not going to talk gambling and football futures. But in fact, you released the Vikings, I think, on this podcast, which you're like, last year, and it crushed. It was an easy win. They were a great team, and we were all over it. And we almost got Dalvin Cook to lead the league in rushing. So let's try and do that again this year. I would say, like, what are some strategy points you have for NFL DFS when you're starting to construct, lineups and how you look at it?
Yeah, so even more so than, and I preach this all the time with the community. Like you said, we have a tremendous Slack, and that foundation of, because once people get in there, they rarely leave. I mean, we have a lot of people that feel like, man, this feels like a family. I'm glad I found it, and it's a little bit different than some of the others. There's a lot of great platforms out there. Many are friends of mine, co-people in the industry that I certainly respect, but I feel like we have a little bit different platform there. But I think the biggest thing I preach in golf is the lineup construction part, because once you get down to get past your ownership and your player pools and all that, it becomes, if you're not fading certain people or you want to get some of the chalky guys, you've got to, how are you going to build your lineup to be different? Are you going to wind up, being duped or something like that, as people would say? NFL, it's even more important because there's only so many quarterbacks that are going to get played in a week, that are really hyped up type, for a DFS slate it's talking on the main slate Sunday. So, there may be 5 or 6 quarterbacks that are legitimately probably in play that week, because there's just not many home run hits out there. And so it's not like golf where you every position's, there is no positions. You can pick 6 guys. Yeah.
You're picking 6 golfers. You're not, you're
quarterback, running back. Yeah.
Especially once you get in the middle of the season and, you got 6 teams on bye, right? And so all of a sudden, math genius in me says, you got 13 games. So you have half of those games are probably going to involve elite defenses or not good quarterbacks. And so your player selection pool has narrowed dramatically, which makes it even more difficult to really put because I think I've started to finally realize this. It's like putting together a puzzle. Like, you basically have to create the correct puzzle, the puzzle that somehow manages to hit in both in football and golf. Obviously the positions are different, but like that's what it has to be. It has to be the perfect puzzle if you want to win. And I think people should understand this if they're playing DFS maybe for the first time, which I think a lot of people will be in this fantasy season, especially with, I could see fantasy leagues sort of falling by the wayside because of the weirdness of the season. But like, there is the gradient, the grade for paying out. Like, you're like, I'm going to do the million maker, I'm going to make $1 million. You're probably not. You're probably going to get your money back if you have a really good week. And that's just sort of the unfortunate nature of it, right?
Right. And so that's what I was getting at, is for me, the first step in especially NFL and probably even college is the contest selection part. Like, that's much more crucial to how you start the week than your lineup and stuff. Because I think in NFL more so than any other sport, like in golf, I feel, if I'm feeling strong about a week and I have some leverage, like if there's a 150 max contest out there, like you said, that's going to pay $1 million up top.
And when you say 150 max, you mean, sorry, I know what you mean, but you mean 150 max lineups. So they're different kinds of, I'm trying to do the basic level. Debo, is this what I should be doing? I don't know. Maybe.
No. Yeah. So like you can, when you see that, and I actually met a lot of new people here in Oklahoma since I've been back, and they've started inquiring about it. And that's the first thing I see when I start looking at like reviewing their stuff or talking to them, is like, they're putting 5 lineups in the $20, and they don't realize that a single person can put 150 lineups in there. So the math and then you're up against, call it 80, 90, 100,000. It's even bigger in NFL. Some of those pots on some of those lineups are 200,000 lineups in there. So like you said, the math of it is difficult to have the nuts, because someone's going to play the one-off Bears stack that no one had, because they're a huge Bears fan, and they go off for 35 points in the first half and you're dead. Right. But I always preach, especially in NFL, and something I'm really going to hone on this year is the content. You have to be even to the field in my estimation. So if you money-wise, you'll want to do a 3 max, well, that means everybody in that contest, the most they can do is put 3 lineups in. So it gives you better building, because you're like, you can't have much of that one-off, because a lot of people are going to play a little bit safe, and maybe you want to take a risk or two, but at least you're only going up against everybody else has the same amount of lineups. If you're putting 10 lineups in the Millie Maker in football, and I know
the max for the Millie Maker is 150 lineups.
150 lineups.
Right.
And I know
if you have one
hundreds
lineup,
of people that are doing it.
Oh yeah.
They're maxing it.
I do it like every week. I'm like, hundreds of people who put
max it. Personally,
150 lineups in
Absolutely.
That's a lot of money.
A lot of money. I mean, there's several guys in the industry I know that literally play 70 to 110,000 a Sunday in NFL football. in entry fees. So if you think you're going to I mean, can you still hit it? Absolutely. But just know your risk reward when you're doing it, because if you're trying to build bankroll and understand yourself, you really got to start out. Like, there's tons of great, I mean, I'm doing NBA right now really for the first time because this is my career now. So I've had more time to kind of focus on that daily stuff. Well, I'm not going up there and competing and like putting $3,000 worth of lineups in. I'm going down and doing the $20 max $3, 20 max $4, which for $80, I think today the 20 max $4, $80 in, the top prize was 15,000. Well, that's great, and I'm getting to understand and learn.
Fun fact.
Yeah,
I've won the $4 before.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, as Devo is well aware, it's actually because with TJ Warren, my NC State guy, I plugged him at the last minute as a swap out at the late lineup. And it's crazy. And I fell asleep before the game finished and woke up, and my screen was like, "You've won $12,000," which was pretty cool. I've been doing the $1 20 entry. And so I guess so it leads me to the next, when you're talking about contest selection, let's say hypothetically a first-time DFS person puts $100 on DraftKings.
Yep.
They deposit $100. What would your suggestion, if you could guide them into putting that money in? Because I mean, I think a lot of people would probably just put the $100 into various contests over the first week. Maybe they wouldn't, but I mean, would you do double ups? Because the double up, you finish in the top 50% and you can get your money back. And obviously these larger contests that we're talking about, like the Million Maker, you have to have a really good lineup to get paid out, because it's like probably 20% of the field gets paid.
Yeah, 20 to 24 in general. I mean, normally when they're first starting out, and let's say that $100, they're okay with losing that week, which means they could re-up next week. I would tell them, well, first thing I would do is try to play a mix of like either a single max, 3 max, and try to do some MME to figure out what you like doing as a person. Like, if you think it's tough for you it's really tough for a lot of people to narrow down 1 lineup or 3 lineups because they feel like they're missing out, that FOMO type stuff. So they may like getting a player pool. And we have all this.
That's me, by the way. I want every, like, I couldn't get rid of Benny on last week, and it killed me because he shot 6 over in the first round. Like, I'm like, oh, what if he does go low? I have FOMO. Like, I didn't have Scotty Scheffler outright, and I was freaking the geek out because when he shot a 59, because he's my favorite golfer on tour. And so I think if people need to understand that if they, you jump into that, you're right. It's a spot on point. Like, you need to figure out how you want to play. Right. Yeah.
And especially with tools like that we have, or wherever people go, where you can go in and go, all right, I can pick 30 guys or have my player pool. And football's a little different. I got my 3 quarterbacks, I got 8 running backs, or however you do it. And then say, hit me 30 lineups and press a button and it builds your 30 lineups for you. Some people might like that because it takes some of the work out of them. Some people like to hand build. I mean, we have options for that, a spreadsheet type deal if they want to do that. But if they feel like, man, I just don't have time for all that. And I think I'll like doing 1 lineup to 3 lineups. And I'd say, do that. We'll go find the best, there's a lot of 3 max $5, 3 max $15, 5 max $5 that you can go in there and spread that money out, and you're leveraged to the field, and start that way where you at least understand how the concept of the building works. And then, which we preach is go back and review who won those contests. If you didn't happen to win, how did they win? Where'd they miss? Where'd you miss? And we do a lot of that in our content review and stuff like that. And we'll help along. And certainly Slack helps with some of that as well. But if you're really getting into it, and it doesn't have to be a professional type deal. If you just want to you can have fun, but you want to try to build bankroll and win. Don't go in blindly.
Win, right? You're not doing it to like hand DraftKings $100. Like, if you're playing fantasy, you're playing daily fantasy, you should believe that you can win. You should want to win. And it took me a long time, and even getting like a jump start from, because I linger around Gup's corner all the time. Not as like hang around Slack. I do all the stuff. It's like. But you do have to have a process built out. And I think I did it like 2 or 3 years ago. I did, what was it? Like, I would do like $50 a week and put it on and put or maybe $60 or something like that, and do like 3 Million Maker entries and just sort of slap them together on Friday and Saturday night. And that is so stupid. Like, you're just throwing away money. And, best case, I'd win $30 back. And so, I think the way to do it is to, and I'm curious what you think you would do for football, because I've leaned on you for advice on golf. Like, you got to get a player pool down to like 30 guys before the tournament, and depending on what tournament, obviously. For football, you mentioned 3 quarterbacks. What do you think is kind of a good player pool to work for when you're planning for a week. Let's just, assuming you're in, I don't know. I mean, like, let's assuming you want to do like 6 lineups, or I don't know. I mean, or
Well,
let's say you do,
yeah, even if you're doing like 20, I think a lot of it will first depend on, and some of that stuff we'll talk about this year as I'm able to engage more is, all right, maybe you don't want to get off the chalk. So let's say Lamar Jackson is going to be the chalk week 1. Everybody's going to be on. I'm just throwing it hypothetically. Well, you may say, I agree with that. So in that 20 lineups, let's say our projections come out and he's going to be, 34% owned or something. Well, you may go, I don't care. I want to play Lamar. I now have to be 60% of them. So that's going to differentiate. All right, how do I do the rest of my builds? Because I only have X amount of slots for quarterbacks. And so you may only play 3 that week and hope they hit off. Or you may go, I'm going to fade the chalk this week and I'm going to spread it out and hope I get, 5 or 6 combos and that chalk doesn't hit, that big game, that Chiefs versus whoever that's got, 55.5 total that everybody plays both sides, Chiefs versus Buccaneers, something,
Because you obviously, you look at everybody looks at the Vegas totals when they're making calls about what players to use. If you were looking at a game and being like, oh, that's 55, I think I'm going to jump in on that. You're not ahead of the curve. Like you're behind the curve. And in fact, I mean, the way to do it is to say, all right, I think so. Like, I was positive. Okay. Was it the Jets Dolphins, or it was some game? Maybe it was Jets Dolphins last year. I was like, this game is going over, and they're going to be 70 points in there, and they ended up settling for like 42 field goals. But I like, that you want to find a game where maybe the total is lower than it looks like, right? And think like, I think that game's going way over. There are going to be more points than they anticipate, and you can sort of target guys that'll be under-owned in spots like that. Whereas everybody is going to naturally gravitate towards Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes. Not only are they, the best, and it makes logical sense to use them, but when you're looking on your phone, cute picture of my son, they are gonna they're the top of the list. So it's like there's a psychological aspect to that too.
Right. And, and that's something that we're going to incorporate into the tools this year a little bit more, is allowing people to say, I do think this game is either I think it's going to go way under, way over, call it a slider, so that they can,
you can weight games that you think will be more valuable or less valuable.
And obviously when you do that, like, let's say, for whatever reason, the Steelers when our team total is 22 versus, whoever they're playing that week, the Ravens or something like that, and you just think for whatever reason, it's going to be more like 34 for them. Well, what we want to be able to do is go, okay, if you do that, what's the correlation effect to the stats? Because someone has to make up those yardage and touchdowns. And maybe that's where you can find that edge or that leverage in a spot that you personally, and that a lot of that for me comes in our handicapping games for betting purposes, which is how I got into all this, is when I start handicapping, I go, man, this line's way off or something. I'll use that potential leverage as a spot in DFS if I think the whole world's on Saints versus 49ers because they're going to score, 60, 70 points between the two teams. I need to go find something different, or you just got to be massively overweight, or it's just going to wind up being a dupe, or, and football's different because you can still get that chalky stack and then play a super low owned Calvin Ridley that maybe no one's on yet. This year there's a few of those type wide receivers that you go, man, no one's on Noah Fant yet, but I think he can really go for 8 and 100 on an upside ceiling game. And I can stack that as opposed to going super chalky where everybody's going to go Brady, Gronk, and then one of the wide receivers, right? That's going to probably be a pretty popular stack week 1. And so if you got to do that, you got to do one of two things: either get super, contrarian at some other position so you're different, or get over leverage on those plays and be double the field or something like that. And football is so hard because you got so many combinations to go through. But I think we can be as prepared as anybody out there. And then, football is such massively talked about that you can use that public perception and look at line movement. People are getting bet up and all that to your advantage in the DFS world.
Yeah. So, just looking at week 1, like Seahawks Falcons is kind of a game where the over under is 49, but I would guarantee you that more people are utilizing players from the Buccaneers and Saints, which is Tom Brady's first game against Drew Brees. And I think that both the Saints and the Buccaneers will end up having better defenses than the Falcons and the Seahawks. Now, I mean, there's a lot more that goes into that than just, bad defenses, because you got to look at pace of play. You have to look at offensive possessions and all of that. But Atlanta doesn't have a good defense. I don't think they're going to probably try to throw the ball because I don't know. They can get Gurley going. We'll see about that. But like, that's you sort of have to play out the game scripts in your mind, and having tools that you can utilize for that, like you guys do. It's almost required in 2020. I don't think you can just like look at the schedule and slap together a list of DFS guys. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, it'd be difficult. Obviously, maybe a single build you possibly can, but I know some of and even us, as we've developed them, like our scouting report we have for NFL and college, which will be back this year and kind of enhanced. It'll show, average plays per game by the offense in both offenses. So you want to see how is their defense, leaving them on the field all the time, whatever, yards per play, time of possession, who's keeping the ball. Are they, so if you got an offense that's going up against another offense that seems to control the ball a lot, well, that's going to limit that team's opportunities on the field. And that's just, it's Seahawks, so subtle.
Seahawks and Falcons, right? Like it might not work because if Seattle wants to run the ball 7,000 times, and Lord knows they apparently want to in the first half.
Right. And you got to, and that's where, and Bobby does a good job college, and he's stepping in on NFL some this year of analyzing the offensive coordinators, the coach, the mindset of that game and that game script, how it's going to run out. And you go, this could be bad setup for this team that they're playing against because of the way this guy likes to coach. And there's just not your average Joe's going to go out there and do all that research, which is why we have the platform we do. And we try to provide as much as we can, but it definitely will give you the edge on that kind of stuff. And, in NFL more than anything, the, instant reaction, overreaction to stuff and underreaction allows for a lot of edge that I late in the season, I started just doing that. I'd take those stances because I knew everybody's going to overreact to a great performance or underreact to a bad one. And you could really get some leverage there. And I focused on my NFL. I sucked for a while. I just struggled with gaining that advantage and really finally had a decent year last year. In college, we've had as good of an edge as anybody in the industry the last 2 years. Bobby's bar none, tremendous. And then I hop in there and help out at the time, especially a lot more contacts in the college side to get a hold of information.
You can get information in college sort of who's, I think I've erroneously given you like, hey, you should check out. Oh no, who was it? Xavier, Zonovan Knight, my guy from NC State, who played pretty well in a couple spots, nothing insane, but
Bobby played at Notre Dame, so he's well connected up there in that Big Ten type world and all that. And obviously, I have a lot in the Big 12, so it definitely helps to spread out and get. And we're following. I mean, we're going above and beyond. Like we're following Twitter beat writers, which will be weird this year to see how that works out. I don't know how many are going to be able to be on the sidelines and stuff, but you're following that because you're trying to look for inside information, especially college, especially when you start getting into the mini slates throughout the week. The pack attack, all these midnight Mac attack type games and stuff like that. There's such an edge there that just getting in the Slack and then obviously getting our little Bobby will do a write up for any big slate. That alone will give you a ton of edge and stuff like that. And NFL is going to be a little different because it's so sad. So you really have to think outside the box and get uncomfortable with some of your plays. But there are plenty of ways I really think it comes down to A, being in the right contest with the right money, and then B, understanding how to construct, which is something we really talk about and hone on not only in the Slack, but just through the podcast and content, because I think people don't understand the leverage spot, whether it be ownership or leaving money on the table, stuff like that, in not only football, but any of the sports.
Well, and it's weird because I think that the general you goes into DFS, even just NFL DFS, and it's like, okay, I'm going to use my football knowledge to pick the best people possible. But the reality is that for all of these sports with DFS, and this is what I was getting at with the puzzle thing, I just said it poorly, it's more about game theory. Like it really is more about game theory than now. If you pick, like you could pick the chalk, and if the chalk all goes off, all the heavily owned guys, and you just happen to pick all of them, you can win. It happens. Like so you have to go with your gut to a degree, but also like you have to be willing, as you point out, to take some stances that might be a little different, because if 40% of let's say you enter the $12 single entry contest, which is one I like to do, because you just know everybody, it's the same thing. Everybody has one lineup that they do.
Right.
If you think 40% of that field of the 10,000 people or whoever enters it are going to have Christian McCaffrey, well, I mean, he's probably going to have he's probably going to put up some points, but he has to put up a lot of points in order to pay off A, his cost, and B, his ownership. And so, you could kind of pivot to a different running, like a Joe Mixon, who might be under-owned in a lesser publicized game. And, Mixon beats McCaffrey. And as you point out, you have a huge amount of leverage on the field.
Well, not only that, just getting off that one guy,
Right.
Your natural construction of your lineup is going to be different because everybody else that's starting McCaffrey is generally going to go. They have the same kind of dollar pool.
You narrowed 100% down to 60%, or whatever the number McCaffrey is. And so now, if you're right about your lineup, you just have to beat 60% of the field, which is a huge. I mean, that's massive.
Well, and I think this year, for sure, DFS will probably, like you mentioned, be a little more. I think there are going to be people that get frustrated with the whole COVID, and then half an offensive line gets test positive on a Saturday night. Well, in your season long, you don't have many options and to go in there and pick up someone. I know everybody's season long is probably adding some spots or some IR spots or something so you can try to pivot, but you're going to be picking up nobody's on the free agency market on a Sunday morning. So the DFS, at least worst case, you're pretty much by 10 o'clock ish, on Central Standard Time, so 11 your time.
Yeah,
know if
everybody, right?
Yeah, and the COVID people are going to be well out before that, so you don't have that last minute. This dude they're not going to have a test positive at 11 a.m. on Sunday. They're going to know it at least the night before. Right. So I mean, gambling and all that kind of stuff. That stuff's going to be. It's easier to do. And we will get into gambling in a little bit. That's going to be tough because you'd like to normally jump on lines, at least, sharper guys that like to, get on lines early before they move a lot. Could be some hesitancy this year to go, I want to hop on a line and put some bankroll out there. And then the running back gets test positive on Thursday and I'm out. So
or the quarterback.
Quarterback.
Yeah. Or like 3 offensive linemen, and like RJ White said in a previous pod, it's almost, I think you could see underdogs get more early action than favorites because, you're not going to see a 9-point dog go to like plus 20. I mean, more than likely,
sure.
If everybody gets sick, that could happen. But by and large, it will probably be fine. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, we'll talk some week 1 DFS options and then some gambling and future bets. Okay, so we mentioned week 1 a little bit, like and so people understand the slates work like this. There's the Thursday night showdown slate, which means you can play a single game. I really like playing them, but man, it is a freaking crapshoot. I don't think anybody who's doing DFS for the first time should invest a lot into those single game showdowns. Does that seem fair? I mean,
no, yeah, it's the captain mode makes it a little bit trying to figure out who you're going to put in the captain spot on those NFL showdowns, but you're definitely much more. It's definitely something. If I was going to do it, whatever my bankroll allowed, I'd be doing, even if it's a 25-cent 20 max. I'd want to get as many combinations as I can to do it because you're right. You have to take some chances on the third string wide receiver that may happen to get a touchdown for the first time in 6 weeks. That may make the difference. Break the slate is what we call it.
I had Raheem Mostert as my captain in the NFC Championship game when he ran for 200 yards and 3 touchdowns, and I didn't even like sniff winning it because you're just going to have like there. Yeah, as you point out, there are these guys who put in tons of lineups. They have tons of bankroll because they've won these, and they're going to put in all kinds of crazy combinations. And there's only so many dudes that you can have in that single game showdown. So I think that's a good call. Like lots of entries, low cost. But there's a Thursday night showdown, a Sunday night showdown, and a Monday night showdown. And then the rest of the slate for DFS is the 1 p.m. and 4 p.m. games. The regular NFL games. So you're sort of choosing from that. And so week 1 is a little tough because the Texans are off the board. Chiefs, when the Chiefs are off the board, it's a problem. You also have the Rams and Cowboys. So you're a ridiculous amount of high-level skill position guys. And then, of course, on Monday, there's multiple games. So we have – why can I not – they already have They already have freaking week 2 lines up too already. Great. Titans and Broncos and Steelers and Giants. I mean, that's a ton of guys who are off the main slate. Is there anybody that sort of, and people listening to this, do not take anybody that we say here as gospel because A, COVID, B, it's freaking, August 25th and the games are a ways away. But I mean, is anybody on your radar at all for week 1? And if you.
Yeah, no, I think, I don't know what's going on with the Jaguars and that whole kind of system. I think with the Colts, I definitely, and they could wind up being chalky, but I think those running backs could have a huge week. Mac and Taylor. It's maybe a situation, if they're going to pound the ball a lot, we don't know what Rivers is going to be like per se, but there are times you start both running backs. I mean, last year when Gordon came back, Eckler and Gordon could pay off depending on the price, the value of that. Taylor's going to be a rookie, so if he comes in cheap, you may be able to start both. And if he gets a touchdown on limited carries type of deal, or he's the PPR type of guy, you can get in that situation where that may make you unique. I like Denver a lot in general this year, but I think they're on the Monday night.
Yeah, because they have the 2 Monday night games. Yeah.
Yeah. So that kind of, I think Locke.
I like the idea of in week 1, you mentioned the Colts. So I'm sort of in on Marlon Mack, Kerryon Johnson, Devin Singletary, guys who have been in the league, whether they're veterans or in Singletary's case, just been in the league a little bit longer, like second year, who are competing against rookies for the starting job, because I think that this offseason will make rookies, I think it'll make it a little bit tougher. And those rookies are heralded and hyped up, and we won't have any preseason games, so we won't see how they're split up. So I think maybe there's some value in sort of Marlon Mack is not sexy. Nobody likes Marlon Mack. Nobody wants Marlon Mack. Like, you can get him in like the 10th round of a fantasy draft, whatever it is. Like, nobody wants Kerryon Johnson. And I just sort of wonder if week 1, maybe those coaches are like, all right, look, we can't trust. Like, you really going to trust DeAndre Swift in pass protection week 1 with Matthew Stafford, having all those injury, back injury and all that. So maybe Kerryon Johnson week 1 out of the gate, maybe Marlon Mack. I think that could be an interesting spot to look for, because there's no way those guys will be expensive.
No, and I'm interested to see, especially like you mentioned, you don't have Mahomes on the slate. I got to think that Lamar will be popular against Cleveland.
Oh, yeah.
Is a Cam Newton against the Dolphins at home going to go under some kind of radar? He'll still be popular, but he may be 12% where Lamar's 35%. So I can take that and hope he kind of comes out as focused as he seems to. I'll be big on, even though they're going up against 49ers, it's actually one of the week 1 bets I like. I like the Cardinals +7 against 49ers. One thing I'm looking at this year, and Bobby's done a lot of the research for us and already put out 2 articles, is reviewing kind of what you mentioned. Who's got the long-term chemistry, less turnovers, especially who's not having a new offensive coordinator or head coach, quarterback type combo. Worries me a little bit about my Cowboys with Dak, because it's a brand new system, right? I think he's got all the weapons in the world, and one of my bets, sleepers that I'll give out later, is involved in that as a rookie. But that thing, and then looking at who's a new defensive coordinator that week 1, trying to establish his team and his set versus, like you said, a veteran quarterback. That stuff I still hadn't got into deep dive yet, because obviously we've been nonstop with golf. But those are things I'll go to look at and say, I don't know off the top of my head, but you mentioned one. I mean, if there's a brand new defensive coordinator at, say, the Panthers, well, you should know that. I don't remember that. I know they switched coaching staff, so
they're all new. Hey,
all new, right?
Nobody in that building that's been there for like more than a week, except maybe Shaq Thompson.
The Raiders may be a great opportunity against that type of setup. We don't know what the Panthers don't. But on the flip side, there's no film, as we mentioned. So the Raiders are like, we don't know what kind of defense they're going to play for sure. They'll know the coaches, and they'll go do the research. Say this coach likes to play a 4-3 or 3-4 or whatever, 3-3-4, something like that. But those are the things, especially week 1, I think we'll have a great advantage if you choose to do it. I'm more likely going to be doing MME stuff because of such the unknown. I don't know that I want to get down to a single lineup. I always have one bullet in something, but I'll definitely be looking at
mass multi-entry for people that don't know. It's like that's the one where you could enter you can do the 4, like Gup was talking about before with the basketball, like $4 per lineup, 20 lineups, $80 for the full contest. And that way, if like you decide to roll the dice on a on a Derek Carr, Amari Cooper stack, and what am I talking about? He's on the Cowboys. Derek Carr and Henry Ruggs stack or whatever, Darren Waller, and then they suck for whatever. Like the Panthers defense is suddenly great, which is probably not going to happen. But like it doesn't take down your whole Sunday, and that's sort of the risk reward. I do wonder with the stacking, how much what percent of your lineups do you end up stacking? Where, and that's the term. Obviously, it's like you take Matthew Stafford and Kenny Galladay, so Stafford throws a bomb to Galladay, and all of a sudden you are flying up the leaderboard because you get double the points.
Correct. It really depends on kind of how the slate's going. I definitely don't mind playing the term naked quarterback, which means most people will say you need to at least stack him with at worst case a running back, a tight end, but at least one wide receiver, because the theory is if he goes off, then how is a wide receiver not going to be good, right? But sometimes you get in a difficult position of which freaking wide receiver is going to do good. And so some guys, people do both. Like some will have, there'll be a ton of Brady, Gronk, and then either Godwin or Evans type lineups, or some will put all four in and say, I hope they score 40 today and I get a piece of all of it. So it definitely kind of more depends on, I like to try to get sneaky stacks, if that makes sense. Like,
for
if
sure.
Dallas was playing on the main slate on that week 1, I for sure would have Dak and CeeDee Lamb because I think CD is.
And this is not because you're an Oklahoma Cowboys homer. It has nothing to do with that. And by the way, CeeDee Lamb is, I had as my number 3 player in the draft coming out. So like I am all in on CeeDee. I'm trying to think who I had ahead of CeeDee Lamb. It was Joe Burrow, and now I forget. I would have taken CeeDee Lamb 3rd overall. That's what I'm saying. He's incredible, and he's showing up at camp, and he's got he's got a smart coach and an offensive coordinator. Kellen Moore's been there, and a stud quarterback in Dak. Like they just have 3 number 1 wide receivers in Dallas.
They do, yeah, and you can't cover them all. So he's going to be shifty. They've talked about using him in some of that, running, even in the running game, like sweeps and stuff like jet sweep stuff like that. So I like that he's going to get involved. I doesn't mean I'm going to go put him in 8 out of 10 lineups, but I don't have to. He's not going to be that high owned. So those are the type of spots I want to look for in that, and not only week 1, but in general, where can I exploit the leverage to the field that week on games that I think people may not be paying much attention to, like you mentioned. And that, I definitely think Lamar's game, and I think Baker could be a good, and sometimes you'll see, we talk about stacks, it'll be a game stack, but they'll go the opposite way. So they may have Baker and just play Hollywood and hope Hollywood goes off, and maybe Baker and
or you do Mark Ingram and Baker and Odell. And you hope that like the Ravens are up big and running it, and Baker's having to chunk it a bunch, and all of a sudden, because like that's how the game script would work. One team, the team with the 8.5 point spread, or the team that's favored by 8.5 points, is going to presumably, especially the run control team, is going to be pounding the ball, and then at the same time you have the other team trying to catch back up, and so you can create different. Like to your Colts point, if you played both Colts running backs, you could then come back and have Gardner Minshew as your quarterback, and hope that the Colts are up big, pounding the ball with their running backs, feeding both Mack and Jonathan Taylor, and then Gardner's having to just chunk it down deep to DJ Chark and D.D. Westbrook.
Yeah, because without question, I would assume the Saints-Bucks are going to be the highest stack game.
Absolutely.
It won't even be close. It's a late game too, so
And Breeze to I forgot about this. This is obvious, and I'm an idiot, but obviously the salaries are out. Lamar's 1, Russ, Breeze, Matt Ryan, Tom Brady. So those are your top 5 quarterbacks in terms of salaries. Brady 6,500. Lamar is jacked up at 81. No surprise because he was a slate murderer last year. But there's like when you go to that, and then Josh Allen is 6. When you go to the quarterback page to draft a quarterback, you're going to see cheaper options that you can just hit with your thumb, and there are going to be a lot of people who do that. And Brady and Breeze, when you see Tampa Bay at New Orleans in the late game, you're going to be watching it. People are going to want to play those 2 quarterbacks.
Yeah, and like you mentioned Lamar, and probably should be noted, the reason why Lamar tends to just murder slates is because of the running. It scores so much more in NFL as a running. All the rushing yards he gets, it's hard for a passing quarterback to match that. Now, it doesn't mean he's always. I don't know. I'd like to get your opinion on. Do you think they try to dial him back on being mobile this year, or do you think they just say this is our guy and we're gonna keep doing what we're doing? Obviously, I think they're gonna throw more, and I think Hollywood obviously has put some weight on, and he should be more durable. And people forget how good he is and how fast he is. Another OU guy, but do you think they're gonna kind of dial him back some, or just keep going?
It's a great question. I would not. I think that when you see them use a 2nd-round pick on a guy like J.K. Dobbins out of Ohio State, who I really like and is, should be, I think will be, I think they're going to blend Dobbins and Ingram. Ingram's a little bit older. You drafted Justice Hill last year out of OK State. I would be really, really surprised if Lamar finished with, I don't think he'll top 175 carries. I think maybe closer to and now last year before the season, I said, there's no way he's going to be over 150 this year. There's no way he can run at that. Actually, I take that back. He started 7 games He ran less last year. He was just more effective in 2019 than he was in 2018. He was so dynamic as a passer. Like, I don't think he's going to average. He probably won't average 7 yards per attempt rushing again. I mean, that led the freaking league. And so if he regresses at all running, and they give him less carries, that's why I won't draft him in the first round or second round or third round in a season long fantasy league, because I just think regression on touchdowns and probably the rushing is built in there. So yes, to answer your question, I think he rushes less.
Yeah, and this is a unique. You mentioned week 1 pricing's already out. DraftKings likes to do that at times and get the hype up. Obviously, normally they come out Sunday night for the next week, but so there's going to be some pricing stuff we can take advantage of, especially as you start seeing depth charts get set. DraftKings can't price in if someone skyrocketed to be starting running back that was 4th on the depth chart when they put the pricing out. So. But the problem with that is a lot of people will hop on that type of chalk because they're cheap. So there could be you see that, and that may be a point to pivot and go, all right, we don't know that guy's will be good just because he's a $3,000 running back and now he's starting. And I'll just say I'm off. I'm not going to do it. This happens a lot when a lot of running backs get, they're questionable going in, and then right at 11:30 or whatever it comes out and he's out. Well, everybody goes to his backup. Right. $3,300, and then they start but when you do that, everybody's going to that, then everybody's plugging the Michael Thomas and these kind of guys that are super expensive because they can fit them now, and you're virtually going up against the same lineups and you have no leverage. So it's really, I mean, there are some times that it's worth it. You just know the guy's going to go off, but at times you can really fade that kind of stuff.
All right, let's talk more specific gambling and fantasy for the season, because again, like week 1 is fun to talk about and it's coming soon, but we saw Grant Delpit, like right before we started recording this, rookie safety, second round pick for the Browns. He went down there where it's Achilles. We don't know, but like that sort of stuff. I mean, they're going to be, I think they're going to be even more injury changes leading into the season because of how this offseason has worked. What are you looking at from a futures gambling perspective? What's catching your eye?
Yeah, futures are difficult this year, obviously, because people, I mean, you'd want to tell people to make sure they understand the betting rules wherever they're betting. As far as games getting played, what's the rule, Heisman stuff. I don't know if they're going to do that, but any of that stuff, offensive rookie of the year.
Do not bet the over on a team if it says, like, it needs to say must play 16 games.
Correct.
You know what I'm saying? Like if that's not built in and you won't get your money back for that, then don't. Isn't that right? That's what you wouldn't want to bet the over.
No, absolutely
on anything.
No, most should, but I'd make sure that you have that's in their rules, because you don't under, maybe you take the chance, but you still wouldn't want to, because you want to play a full season, and most will probably do that. But especially some of these, the over under deals is one thing, but then like yardage, so guys that get over certain rushing yardage or something like that, is it going to be rushing leader? If they only played 12 games, are they going to go, this is the rushing leader, and they're going to pay it off, or is it must play 16? Make sure you know that before you get in. I definitely will have as least season-long stuff that I've ever had probably in 10 years. But I'll still have some that I think I like. And one of the hardest things, I've been working on my rankings. I do power rankings every week, like a lot of people, is factoring in home field advantage. I mean, that's going to be, with no fans, limited fans, that's huge in the betting world. Normally it can be a 3 to 6 point swing, based on whether you're home or away. I don't think you can factor that in as much this year. So that's another thing to kind of go through. I like, my first one I like is the Bills under 9. I like them. I think they can, solid defense, not a ton of changes. I think obviously Diggs will help, and obviously free up, Brown some to actually have another wide receiver there. But I just think that's more directed to people underestimating what Belichick can do with the Patriots. And I think 9's probably the right number, right around there. 8.75 is where I had it, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're in my world, those fractions of a numbers, it's not a huge bet, but I love the Bills under and the Broncos over are my two favorite right out of the kind of long term. I'm high on the Broncos this year. I think. Are you
worried? Are you worried the Broncos are too trendy? Are the Broncos trendy? I feel like they are, but maybe I'm wrong. I sort of get in my head around August about who's on what teams.
Right. It's kind of like, was it the Browns last year that was real trendy? But 7.5 isn't
fading the Browns, but I faded them with the Steelers instead of the Ravens, unfortunately.
Yeah, like 8-8 doesn't sound like, it's not like he's got to go there. I mean, 10-6. I mean, Locke's good. We saw that the last 4 weeks, but more than that to me is, I mean, Hamler and Judy are studs.
Yeah.
I mean, tremendous college football players. And that just, Fant's good. And I think their defense will be good enough. And where there's not much home field advantage this year, or potentially with no fans, at least they still have their home field advantage because of the altitude type stuff. So
great point.
They may have more of a home field than most. Like I love them week 1, they're -1.5. That would be a bet I'll make. I'm obviously going to let the line kind of settle in a little bit, but I like them over. I like the Lions over this year a lot. I think that division's
welcome to the team Lions.
Yeah, I think Stafford, what they did without him last year with like scrubs compared to, potential, and the offense is definitely, loaded and can go. And if they can just have somewhat of a decent defense, and I'm down on, I like the Vikings, still Vikings fan, but Vikings, Bears, and Packers aren't like making me get all giddy inside. So
all 3 of those teams, in my opinion, I assume you agree, had bad off seasons. Like the Vikings lost a ton on defense. They lose their offensive coordinator. I know that Kubiak's going to come in and be fairly seamless. They lose Stephon Diggs. Like, you can't tell me. I mean, Justin Jefferson's a stud. Don't get me wrong. But he ain't coming in and being Stephon Diggs out of the box. Like, you're hoping he develops into Stephon Diggs or some sort of version of that. Thielen's been a little banged up. I love Irv Smith and I love Dalvin Cook. We don't know that the offensive line will be great, and I just don't think defensively. I could see them slipping into like the 10 to 15 range instead of being like, top 10 defense. And if that happens, they can take a step back. Chicago doesn't know. We don't know what they're doing at quarterback. And Green Bay, I mean, if you like Green Bay's offseason, I'd like to meet you, because you're the only, like, you're either Aaron Nagler or you're like one of the Packers beat writers or someone that I don't necessarily believe. Like, I don't know anybody like the Packers offseason.
Yeah, I just can't. It worries me that they didn't get him weapons. So I'm like, what is the mindset of the entire? And you get a running back in the second round when you already have 2 very viable running backs in the NFL.
Right.
But that's no matter how they split it, that's 3 guys compete, and you still have no wide receivers outside of Adams, really. I like some of their young guys. They flourish at wide receiver, but Rodgers, I just don't know where he's at mentally. Is he frustrated? I mean, if that thing could go haywire in a second.
Exactly.
Also,
it could go sideways fast.
So, 7-9 for a break-even bet on the Lions, I'll take that. And the last one is, until you get to the props is, and I don't, kind of hates me to say this, but I think the Eagles, even though they're going to be battling with the Dallas to win the division, I think the Eagles 10-6 is a pretty safe number for me. I think that team is undervalued there, in my opinion. So over 9.5 for the Eagles is another bet that I've made.
Debo, I know you're listening excitedly, and I didn't tell you that Gup is a Cowboys fan before we had him on. You probably would have. Debo's a huge Eagles fan. He cried when they won the Super Bowl. Pete Prisco likes to make fun of him for that, and I wouldn't have. I don't know that he would have. He would have been like, I lost Gup's contact if he'd known you were a Cowboys fan. But what do you think about the Eagles over?
No, he's invited back. That's what 10-6 gets you. I have similar optimism, but it's nice to hear it from someone that dislikes the team.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Redskins and Giants are going to struggle. Giants probably a little bit of success, but I don't know if their defense is nowhere near where it needs to be. And Washington, we don't know what we're going to get out of there. Obviously, the sad news about Coach Ron, and I don't know what impacts they're going to have. That kind of happened over the weekend. I hadn't dove in to see if he's stepping away at all or anything. I'm sure you probably know more about that.
Yeah, no, I mean, he said Jack Del Rio. Yeah, so Ron Rivera was diagnosed with, I believe, is it prostate cancer? Is that right?
I think it's
lymph node cancer. Excuse me. Yeah. But I think, and I mean, look, lymph node cancer. And this is one where they said, they think that he's going to recover. He says he's going to recover. He's going to be fine. All that. But I mean, in a COVID world, right? You can't necessarily take a lot of the chances that you might otherwise. And so I think there's a chance. There's a case that perhaps he steps away. That would mean Jack Del Rio's in charge. But yeah, I think the Redskins could struggle with all the transition they're going through for sure.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. And I just think the Eagles are maybe overlooked because of that. I don't know. I mean, I love the Cowboys. Obviously, they're my team per se, but I never let my heart get in front of money, and especially DFS and all that kind of stuff. But I just think the Eagles are a good team, and I think they did well with all the banged up injuries they had last year. I think Miles Sanders is a stud. I love him. I use him a lot in DFS type stuff, and I just think they can easily. I think 10-6 is actually low. I mean, I could see him 11-5 and flirting with a 12-4 type of record. So I like him, and that staff's there. I mean, you got veteran quarterback with that coach. I mean, all that kind of stuff I like to see going into this type of year, a COVID year, if you want to call it that. They're a team I'm high on this year.
All right, give me a couple props that you like.
Yeah, I got two. First one obviously is kind of hinted to. I bet CD at Rookie of the Year. I've seen him 17 to 20 to 1, depending on different books. I like either. Yeah, I like that number for him. Typically, a quarterback. I don't see Burrow succeeding like that to be Rookie of the Year per se. I think he's going to struggle a little bit, although he's got all the talent in the world. We saw that last year. And then the running back. But I don't think CEH is in a position to kind of just dominate statistically in that Kansas City offense, right? So I think CD could go for over 1,010 touchdowns this year, and that's going to be huge. And so that number, the 17, 20 to 1 number is great value. And then kind of my sleeper one that I was high on is I got Calvin Ridley over 1,025 yards. I think he's going to have a breakout year. Uber talented, I played him a lot last year in certain spots, and he had like 860, 880 yards last year in a very weird Atlanta year. They're a team I think that could be undervalued this year a little bit, but Sanu's out now, so I think he's a solid too. And then you got Hooper will take some off of him, and obviously you got Julio. So I think he could have a tremendous year in Atlanta, and that division they have high scoring games a lot. And I like their schedule. I looked at it, and I think some of the secondaries they'll play lines up for them. So that's a kind of a sleeper long-term prop that I like.
So I think a lot of people, when you look at like long season fantasy drafts, I did a mock draft earlier today, and I'm staunchly I'm taking 2 running backs unless stuff goes haywire and there's just like Julio falls to me in the second round. I'll take I don't mind that, but I'm taking running backs early, and then wide receivers. There's just a lot of deeper like Tyler Lockett. You can get as your wide receiver 2 in the 4th round. Calvin Ridley is going really early. Do you think there's a chance he could outperform Julio Jones from a statistical standpoint?
Yardage wise, yes. Touchdowns, I don't know. Julio's so good at red zone typically. But I think he could have more yards than Julio, and even potentially more catches, just because Julio will get a lot of the rollover coverage, allowing him to sneak across the middle and stuff, and that's what he does well. Sure. So I think he could do yardage. Touchdowns, maybe not as much, because he tends to get those long touchdowns, which is good. But when they get in the red zone between Hooper and Julio, they seem to be the targets. So
so maybe it's a Hayden Hurst Julio thing now. By the way, CeeDee Lamb 14 to 1 at William Hill. I still think that's pretty good value. He's even with Henry Ruggs and right ahead. They're just ahead of Jerry Jeudy. And the second tier of running backs, DeAndre Swift 18 to 1. Jonathan Taylor 12 to 1. Don't bet that. He's not going to get that many carries. Tua 8 to 1. You can't bet that. You don't know how many games he's going to start.
Right.
And like you said, Edwards-Helaire and Burrow, I do think are the favorites. Yeah. But that's a pretty short price for them. Kyler probably could have lost to Josh Jacobs last year. If Jacobs had played, he probably would have lost to Josh Jacobs if Jacobs had played the full season. And so
we'll see. I kind of agree with that. Yeah, definitely. He had a good year, but it wasn't like stand out.
What do you think about Kyler as an MVP candidate?
I've already got all the Kyler money I needed from the Heisman, so I definitely don't. I think it's too short.
By the way, what did you get him at? Like 55? What was it? 35 to 1?
40 to 1, and then 33 to 1.
Heisman.
Yeah. I like him a lot. I just don't know if I trust I know the O-line on paper looks a lot better, but I need to see it before. If that O-line is just anywhere sufficient so that they can sustain drives, that was the problem last year. Yes, he is talented enough to win the league's MVP, but you still got Lamar out there. You got Mahomes out there. You got just absolute elite guys.
And he's like 20 to 1 now too, which it's just
right. The number was with those big boys up there, and Brady, if Brady comes back and has a monstrous year out of nowhere, he could easily be slid right back into that type of deal. So I like him. I don't like that number. That's the number that sometimes, depending on you can get live numbers week 3, week 4 in as things start shifting, and maybe he drops a little bit, and as things settle and the O-line plays together a little bit more, maybe he has a bang up, last 12 games when he starts out just average, something like that.
Yeah. So he's even Carson Wentz. I'd rather have it 25 to 1. I think at this point over Kyle, and I really like the Cardinals this year. Last one. Unless you have more props, but I'm curious what you think about. And I mentioned Ridley in that receiver range. What Michael Gallup? So how do you do you think that Gallup and Cooper and CeeDee Lamb are all viable starters in fantasy this year? If it's possible.
It is possible. I mean, you obviously at times you had that with the Chiefs. I like Gallup a lot, which is why I actually think Cooper could come by the end of the year kind of third as far as total stats, yards, touchdowns to Gallup and CeeDee Lamb. Honestly, I mean, I think obviously, people key on him originally, but now with getting CD in, I've seen him a million times in person live. And I think people, which is why I was shocked like you that he fell that far. I think both of them will do tremendous and will be a popular stack for several weeks, with Dak and Gallup, CD, Cooper, however you want to mix and match all that.
Right.
Definitely all that can be there, but there's a lot of wide receivers that are, like you mentioned, wide receivers fairly deep that you can go, especially rookies. I really think it's a strong rookie class with Judy, Ruggs. I even a sleeper guy that I've been trying to pick up in drafts. I got him in the first one I've done is back to the Eagles is Rigger from TCU. Great. Stud, great guy. Michael Pittman.
Burner and a perfect fit for what they need with to pair with Wentz. And he's like, you can get him. Lamb is going a lot earlier because all the in drafts, at least the one we did today, because of all the hype coming out of Cowboys camp and that offense, and it's a good landing spot and all that. Ruggs and Rager, you can get. Fairly discounted still.
I don't even know if a guy I think that's completely forgotten about just because of his injuries and stuff, but he is uber talented from Arizona State is N'Keal Harry. I think with Cam, he could have a breakout sophomore year because he just kind of got shuffled when he had to be on the IR with the first 8 weeks and just never caught up, especially with a Brady Belichick type of system. But he's damn good. He was really, really good at Arizona State. And I think he can come out and flourish this year and kind of be, I'm trying to get him late in rounds if I can.
And he could be a big red zone weapon for Cam.
Yes.
Too.
Exactly.
I like it. Higher on the pay. It's nothing wrong with being high on Bill Belichick's teams,
Correct.
Don't fade Bill Belichick. I get he lost Tom Brady. Maybe don't fade Bill Belichick just quite yet, folks. All right, Gup. Good stuff, man.
Yep. Appreciate it.
Football's here.
Oh, yeah. So, it's just gupscorner.com if anybody wants to come check it out. We do have a code CBS, 30% off.
Look at that.
Yeah, any monthly, annual. So you can just go to gupscorner.com/membership. Check out the packages. If you have questions, send me a DM and I'll let you know the differences. There's really only two, but you do month or annual. And really it's just a matter of if you're more of an analytical and want to use custom models, tools, stats, the live leaderboard like you talked about. It's not that much of a difference price-wise, so it's certainly worth it because you get all the sports with it. So, yeah, but we want to put that out there for you. Anybody listening, they can go sign up.
All right, so look, if you want to get into DFS, when I got into DFS, I started going to Gup's Corner, and like I said, I won a contest. So what are you waiting for? Go to gupscorner.com, use promo code CBS, you get 30% off. And now is the month you want to do it because, as Gup points out, you get both football and golf, and you can sort of test your chops in both of those sports. You can work up, do some golf leading up to it, and then you can fire away at football in week 1 when it comes, and it's coming soon. Is it at Gup_GC? Is that right?
And we obviously have daily NBA and MLB as it's going right now. As long as I keep going.
Yeah, you get all 4 sports.
Yeah, UFC, NASCAR, it's all covered.
Well, there you go.
Great.
So go get your discount, and it's good to see you, man.
You too. I appreciate it.
We'll play golf soon, and get to crack a couple cold beers, maybe a little Tito's.
Looking forward to it.
All right, man.
Thank you.